Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast. This is a fun one, RJ. I always love when we do mailbag episodes. We get to answer everybody's questions. They are some of my favorite episodes for sure.
Definitely. Love the mailbags. And again, you guys did not disappoint. Lots of really good questions for us to answer in this one.
Yes, definitely. So excited to get into all of that. Got a couple things to talk about first, of course. Top of the list has to be talking about Queen Anne Beer Hall, our wonderful sponsor, and I'm on their Instagram right now, RJ. And in sequence, there is a close-up picture of buffalo wings. And then the previous post was a close-up picture of their incredible pretzels. And then the post before that is a close-up of hot dogs and fries. And I feel like this is very targeted directly towards me, as they're showing off 3 of the 5 foods I actually eat.
I think they're trying to get you up here even sooner than your planned September date, Dylan. I may or may not be involved with that. So
is that what it is?
Let's not talk about it.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, we won't talk about how delicious all the food looks over at Queen Anne Beer Hall for all those reasons.
Nobody talk about how delicious the food at Queen Anne Beer Hall is. Nobody say a single word about it.
Yes.
To all your friends.
Yes. No. We talk about the atmosphere and the atmosphere alone. We don't mention food and that it's good, because then too many people would be there, and that's we got to make sure there's room for us. That's an ad read if I've ever heard one. Other quick thing that we got to plug is tonight. So if you're listening to this kind of right when it comes out tonight, I have my prospect chat over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey. Going to be looking over who the Kraken drafted. Watch as much game tape on them as possible. It's a little hard to get for guys that aren't named Berkeley Katton, but we're going to see what we can do, and then kind of just take stock of what the prospect pool looks like for the Kraken overall now. And so that should be a good time, as it always is. So looking forward to that. And then also, before we get to all the questions everybody had, RJ, you went to a very special event at KCI the other day.
I did. So I went to the second ever Oops All-goalies game, which is what it sounds like. It is a 5-on-5 full hockey game, but it's all goalies. And they're all essentially playing skater, trying to score a goal. The one thing you don't have is goalies in net. You can't be in the crease. You can't block shots that way. And it is one of the most fun hockey events I've ever been to. I mean, it's really something you have to see to believe. And so I made sure to post video and everything to all our socials. So if you haven't seen it already, which I'd be a little surprised if you haven't, because lots of big content aggregators picked it up and everything too. It was on Spit and Chicklets, Bleacher Report, Bar Down, all them. So go watch videos of it if you haven't already seen it. But it was an awesome event, and I just want to shout out Kyle Sorensen, one of the goalies who organized the entire thing. Did the original one up in Bellingham a few months ago, and there was so much interest that he was able to get an even bigger one this time at KCI. It was 2 games, actually. They were able to fill 2 full rinks of all goalies, 65 goalies in total, awesome, showing up to play these 2 hockey games. It was awesome. Was glad to be there. Glad to be involved in a small way, because at the end they had a shootout competition as well, and so I was selected as one of the shooters, and that was really fun to try some of my moves out on the different goalies, and just be a part of the fun atmosphere too. I was told that celebrating was mandatory. They sent out an email, said you must celly if you score, and so I'm not very good at that, but I tried some new cellies out that I've certainly never attempted before. But it was a fantastic time. I hope there will be many more of these games to come, and I'm sure they can fill up 3-4 rinks. There's going to be so much demand for this, because it's just a great time.
It is. It looks like so much fun. I hope to be able to attend one in the future. 65 goalies. That's a lot of goalies. That's a lot of goalie personality.
I have never seen that many goalies all in one place. I don't think anybody else has that had been to that game, right? When else are you at 60? Maybe a goaltending camp, but even then, 65?
65
I don't know.
No, that is absolutely a lot. It was a ton of fun to watch how it all kind of goes down. The highlights that people have been posting from it have been fantastic. My favorite bit was the intermission nap time.
Mm-hmm. They're all so tired from skating around the whole rink. They all just collapse at intermission and take a little nap.
Yes, that is I think my personal highlight, because I felt that. It looks like so much fun, and it's just so awesome that's kind of like turned into this fun, unique Seattle hockey thing. Like that's
I
so
feel like
dope.
it's very Seattle, right?
It is. It is.
Just the scene here, like they would produce a game like this.
If ever there was a city, a hockey city, in which you could get 65 goaltenders to all come together and just play a game and say, no skaters allowed, it would be Seattle.
Yep. So I'm very grateful yet again for this awesome hockey community here in Seattle, and just what a great event.
Yes, no, definitely awesome event. Looking forward to more in the future for sure. And now I'm looking forward to hearing some questions from the wonderful Emerald City hockey community, RJ. So lay them on us.
All right, let's dive right into the mailbag, and I've tried to organize these in a way that kind of makes sense thematically, I guess. We'll see how well I did. But we'll start things off with one that covers, I guess, the most pressing news item that hasn't really happened yet. The only thing left to really happen for the Kraken this offseason, and that's the Matty Beniers extension. So Gabby is wondering, how worried should I be about the Beniers signing situation, the fact that he hasn't signed yet? So in short, I would say not at all. Don't be worried about it. It will get done, but maybe we could get a little bit more detailed into maybe why it hasn't happened and when we expect it to happen.
Yeah, so I mean, I think all along the reason why it hasn't happened yet, why it wasn't necessarily a quick done deal, was because it's the one contract that kind of had the two avenues in which it could go, whether or not it was you're negotiating with your young player on a long-term extension, and if you're Matty trying to lock things down long-term, versus signing a bridge deal, which would just be like 2-3 year deal most likely. And it kind of gives an opportunity for the player to go out there and prove himself a little bit more coming off of his ELC. That's generally what the bridge deals are used for. And that we've talked about in the past makes a lot of sense for Matty Beniers, just because Matty Beniers has, one really, really good season. Last year took a step back. It becomes interesting if you're trying to work out some sort of long, like 8-year term extension, kind of what the value of that is, given he hasn't shown that he can be consistently the guy for you. And on the player side, you also want the opportunity to show that you can consistently be the guy, so you can bump up the number a lot more. So I think it's probably been a little slow, just because both sides have presented kind of the idea of both of those and what their numbers are, and then it comes to, you're almost negotiating two deals at once and then figuring out which one makes more sense for both team and player. So I think that's realistically why it's been taking a little while. That, and on the Kraken side of things, might be taking a little page out of the Vegas handbook, which is do all of your other business, see exactly how much money you have left, and then you go, well, this is all we got, kid.
Yeah, and the reason to do that also is because, the Kraken have 8.1 million in cap space left. So I mean, that would really only cover a long-term deal. But one of the reasons is there's no urgency because Beniers does not have arbitration rights.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that normally drives home something to the finish line before arbitration can happen. You have to make a deal, but in this case, Beniers does not have arb rights, and so there's really no rush from the team side to prioritize it over any other business that they wanted to do. And the only rush now is just get it done before training camp. It really doesn't matter for either side whether this gets done tomorrow or in August. They have all that time to work with, and so generally when team and player have time, they take it.
Yeah, exactly. So, we'll see something obviously before training camp. Everything will be all fine, and it's all going to be good. But there just hasn't really been a big rush to get it the way there was with, say, Tolvanen, who had arb rights.
And also there was a follow-up question in the comments somewhere, I remember, on this, asking about the likelihood of an offer sheet from some other team for Matty. Extremely, extremely unlikely. Offer sheets rarely ever happen. And frankly, they just wouldn't happen for a player coming off a down year like this.
Yeah.
For a team that with a team that has the cap space to match it. If the Kraken had maybe $1 million in cap space and did not have the money to sign him, maybe you'd see a team try and be opportunistic there. But the Kraken have as much cap space as they could possibly need to match it. It would be a pointless offer sheet.
Yes. A lot of times, I mean, really, the very few times that we've seen offer sheets, a lot of times they are when a team with the RFA is in kind of a cap crunch or a cash crunch, and a team is trying to take advantage of that situation, and that's just not the spot the Kraken are in. So yeah, I think the chances of that are near zero.
Exactly. All right. So sticking with questions based around the centers, this next one from John, rank the centers by average ice time next season. Beniers, Wright, and Stevenson. So rank those three guys in order by what we think the average ice time is going to be. We'll go highest to lowest.
Okay.
I have my order right now. Should I say it, or do you want to take the first crack at it?
No, I mean you can go first. I have a feeling we'll probably end up matching up.
Agree
here.
on this.
Yeah,
yes. Yeah. So I think, and I'm sure you agree, Stevenson, Beniers, Wright in that order.
Agreed. Yeah.
And the reason for that, Chandler Stevenson, look, he was brought in on that contract to take the 1C minutes. That's the whole point. If he doesn't have the highest average ice time, what's the point? That has to be the plan. As for number 2, and this maybe has a chance of being flipped around, but I don't think so. Matty Beniers should be number 2 because he's older, he's more experienced. He's at the start of the season, you're not going to have to ease him in. Mm-hmm. You're going to have him right there in that 2C spot. That just makes sense. And then for Shane, by the end of the season, it wouldn't surprise me if some games or even most games he had more ice time than Matty, depending on how things go. Mm-hmm. But for the time being, that early season is going to bump that ice time number down.
Yeah, if you were to ask me from January on, what the ice time, average time on ice would be, my answer might be a little different. I might flip Shane Wright and Matty Beniers, but I think the early season stuff where Shane Wright's going to be eased in is going to play a factor. I think Matty has a chance to work on both special teams in a way that I don't think they're going to have Shane Wright in his first full year. He's probably not going to be out there killing penalties. Even though he's capable of it, he's probably not going to. I think Matty has the potential to join the penalty kill this year in a more significant way. And then Chandler Stevenson, I'm with you, right? Like, you don't bring him in the way you bring him in to have him be your 3C. Right? Like, maybe he ultimately ends up that way because Matty and Shane are the future of the franchise, all that kind of stuff, but certainly not going to be the case this year. He's used to getting a lot of power play time. He's used to getting penalty kill time. He's going to get both of those as well. I think he's going to kind of take over that Alex Wenberg. He's just going to play all the situations and chew up a bunch of ice time kind of spot. And so Chandler Stevenson should be there kind of from start to finish for the year as the guy down the middle.
Right. Now, next question actually maybe questions that premise a little bit here. This one from Chuck. He says, I ran numbers and found that McCann had a higher points per game rate at center than at left wing. Maybe that's a normal thing. But 1, is he a better defender than Stevenson? And if so, 2, would it be worth trying McCann at center and Chandler Stevenson at wing? So should we give the real quick yes to 1 and no to 2?
Yeah.
But let's elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't offhand know Jared McCann's defensive metrics down the middle, but I know Jared McCann knows how to defend, and I do know Chandler Stevenson's defensive metrics down the middle, and they're not good. So I would be very much willing to bet that yes, Jared McCann would be a better defensive center down the middle than Chandler Stevenson. Even if that is the case, though, I don't think you would play them the other way, right? Like, if anything, you would have Jared McCann on the wing of Chandler Stevenson, and then you would have them flip responsibilities in the defensive zone, but then not in the offensive zone. Chandler Stevenson, he's basically just a center at this point. Like, I know he's listed everywhere as a left wing, but he's really just a center. You want him taking face-offs. That's one of the big reasons they're bringing him in, is his ability to win face-offs at a pretty, high rate. Certainly on this team, it'll be a high rate. And so I think you want Chandler Stevenson down the middle. Like I said, Jared McCann has done this before. We've seen Jared McCann do this before, where he has been on the wing and then taken over center defensive responsibilities, where he plays down low. He's covering the slot. We've seen that especially a lot year 1 from him. So I think you could work out something like that, where Jared McCann is going to work defensively as though he is the center, but for all intents and purposes, Chandler Stevenson is the center for everything else.
And talking with McCann at the end of the year too, and Francis about that as well, because McCann did have to move into center later last season because of the Alex Wenberg trade and the hole that created. And it sounded like that was not an optimal situation for the player and for the GM and everybody involved. It just was something that needed to happen because of that hole on the roster and just shoring up a problem there. But the clear plan is for McCann to continue at wing. That's what the player wants. That's what the GM wants. That's, I imagine, what the new coach wants. It's what the old coach wanted. So I think that's clearly going to be the plan. And you're right, Dylan. If you were going to do something like that, you'd have Stevenson be the center, McCann be the wing, and just have different responsibilities in the D zone, which is very doable. The Kraken did that with McCann at center and at wing with guys like Alex Wenberg or Matty Beniers. They've done that in the past. So that would be the way to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So next question from Lindsay, and this is a big one. What lines and D pairs do you think would work best with the new player additions and Coach Dan's system? So full lines and D pairs. What do we want to see? And I know that we had to kind of prepare for this one ahead of time. I've got my lines and D pairs. I'm sure you've got your lines and D pairs that you want to see. I'll let you go first here. What are you thinking here?
It's really tough because like I think first line like we just talked about, I want Stevenson and Jared McCann to play together, right? So like that's 2/3 of that line. I've really struggled at who should be on the other side of that line though. Like who's playing right wing for that line. I settled on Berkey just because like I think he probably needs the ice time up there. I think that those guys work as well as anything. I like his ability to distribute the puck, so you kind of have him out there with your best goal scorer and Jared McCann. That's kind of what I have as the first line kind of breakdown there.
Okay, so my first line, McCann and Stevenson together. We agree on that, and I still also struggled with who to put as the third guy there. I went with Oliver Bjorkstrand, because I think he brings a little bit more of a dynamic kind of range of duties to that line, right? I mean, because Stevenson's not really going to be going in the corner digging out pucks. McCann's not really going to be doing that. Bjorkstrand, can do that. He's a little more versatile there, and also, I mean, he's just your best forward remaining. He's your best winger remaining that you can put there, and I feel like that line's going to get a lot of ice time. I want Bjorkstrand to get that ice time.
And it certainly, it works because you're rewarding him for what he was able to do last year, and that's obviously important. I have him on the second line, and I have him playing with Matty Beniers there, and then with them I have Eeli Tolvanen. Just give him a scorer, another scorer, and surround Matty with guys who could put the puck in the net.
Yeah, so I have something pretty close. I have Tolvanen, Beniers, and then Burakovsky. So basically, we just have those two wingers flipped. And if you're going to have Burakovsky there, which in my lines you do, he's also a good distributor. Matty's a good distributor. You need somebody who's going to be a finisher on that line, somebody with a shot. That's Eeli Tolvanen. So that's why I went with this line. I don't feel the best about it still. This was still it feels like every line that Andre Burakovsky is on for me is the leftovers line. Yeah. And this feels like a leftovers line. Yeah.
Well, and I struggled with it too because like I want, and I've talked about this before, I want like Jaden Schwartz to play with Matty Beniers because Matty Beniers.
Well, that's why I did it, exactly.
Yeah. Doesn't necessarily like to go to the net as much, and so you'd want Matty Beniers with Jaden Schwartz and stuff. But I just think Matty's going to have to work on adding weight. He's going to have to work on playing down the middle more in the offensive zone. Just give him two guys that probably going to be in your top 3 or 4 goal scorers for the year. Maybe it helps ease him in and get him right offensively a little bit more. Just surround him with all that firepower. So that's kind of the direction I went. Third line, Shane Wright and Jordan Eberle. I think they should be joined at the hip for the year. I think that's going to work really well for them. And then on the other side, that's where I have Jaden Schwartz.
Yep, same here. I mean, we saw it at the end of last season. That's the line they chose to go with Shane Wright, and the results were excellent. Worked well. Why mess with it?
Yeah, and Jaden Schwartz is probably their best net front player, but I would say Shane Wright might be their second best. And so what it does is allows kind of what we saw last year, right? Jordan Eberle, Jaden Schwartz, they can go into the corners, they can dig out pucks, they can send them net front to Shane Wright and kind of give it to Shane Wright in his sweet spot there coming down the middle. So I like that combo there. What do you have for the fourth line then, RJ?
So for the fourth line, I have Yanni Gourde centering it, which seems odd to have with the fourth line center, but that's the reality right now. Brandon Tanev, while he's still on the roster, I have him at wing here because I don't know who else. And then Ty Cartier kind of rounding it out. And those are really the the other just
It's
NHLers
just who's
remaining,
left,
unless
yeah.
you want to put maybe a John Hayden in the lineup, which I would have him kind of rotate in, but I wouldn't have, as long as Tanev and Cartier there, I wouldn't have Hayden be a regular above those two.
Agreed. And, to kind of go back to the other part of this question of like what works best with Dan's system specifically, I think Ty Cartier and Brandon Tanev work a little bit better as a bottom six pairing, certainly as a fourth line kind of guys over a John Hayden. Like we saw John Hayden when he's in positions where he can kind of use his skill a little bit more and stuff at the AHL level. We've seen the success that he's had, but I think if he's going to be a fourth liner at the NHL level, I feel like those other guys kind of fit what Dan wants his fourth line to go out there and do a little bit better. And that's the other kind of thing. Like that's part of the other reason why I had like Bjorkstrand with Matty and Tolvanen and Berkey up on the first line is because like with Dan's system, if he's going to stick with like a 2-1-2 where he's going to want kind of two aggressive forecheckers, I feel like that setup gives you two good forecheckers on all of those pairings, right? Because like you can have McCann and Stevenson be your forecheckers. Berkey doesn't have to, right? He can be the guy in the neutral zone. You can have on that second pairing, you can have Matty and Bjorkstrand be your forecheckers, and Ellie can kind of fall back. Or you could have Matty be that like kind of, lone guy in the neutral zone. He's probably up for that at this point in his NHL career. And Tolvanen, we know, can throw the body around when forechecking. And then, Shane Wright obviously knows how to play within the system for Dan. And I'm sure you could get Jaden Schwartz to go out there and forecheck with him. So I think from the perspective of Dan coaching this team, you have to make sure you've got two guys out there that can, kind of aggressively work together and have really good chemistry, where one's going to be pressuring the puck carrier, the other's going to be sitting in the number one passing lane that puck carrier wants to use. And that's going to require coordination and chemistry. And so I think ultimately, all of this might just get dictated by in training camp who works well doing that with who. And all of what we've talked about might not end up mattering. But for now, those are kind of the groups that I think could work really well doing that.
Right. And I think that is worth mentioning, the training camp aspect, because as fun as this is to talk about, and I love it, this all goes out the window once training camp starts and everyone starts to earn jobs or create chemistry with people. And that's really what's going to dictate this. But for the time being, let's move on to the D pairs. So we got the forwards covered. D pairs, what are you thinking?
I mean, Vince Dunn, Adam Larson, right? Like,
yeah, that one seems pretty penciled in, right?
Yeah. I think that's there. Jamie Alexiak, Brandon Montour. Again, you're not going to have Montour, or really either of those guys playing third pairing minutes. Like that would be, you're just not going to. So I think they're going to be the second pairing for now. And then you just round things out with Borg and Riker, right?
Yep. And those two actually had surprisingly good numbers together last season, even in very limited ice time, but still the numbers together were good. So I wonder if that's something the team looked at when deciding that Dumoulin was the guy to ship out. But the D pairs, at least to start, seem pretty clear to me.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. So we've covered the lineup here. And then a question from Grodbort, though, about somebody who we did not mention, but asking, could Ben Meyers be a 14th forward reserve / scratch type, given his ability to play wing and center? And then also asking, is Yanni Newman poised to be a power forward breakout for the Kraken? Thanks, guys. So as far as Ben Meyers, we'll start with him. So he was signed to a 1-year deal at league minimum here. He's 25 years old. He does have some NHL experience with Colorado and Anaheim. This is probably an AHL signing. I don't really expect him to be an extra forward, but here's the player I would compare him to, and that's Devon Shore, and kind of what Shore did with the Kraken this past season. We're coming up a few times, playing in some games if needed for injuries, but I think primarily he'll be an AHL player.
I'm with you 100%. Like that's kind of who he is. This is still the kind of last big year where the Kraken have just too many forwards, essentially. I mean, we just talked about their fourth line is going to be Ty Cartier, Brandon Tanev, and Yanni Gourde, right? I mean, that's a very stacked fourth line with a lot of guys that would be playing higher up on just about every other team's lineup. And that's not even counting like the contracts that fourth line has on it, right? So $9 million fourth line. Yeah, I don't see Ben Meyers, like outside of injuries, beating out, say, one of those guys for a spot. right? Obviously, the versatility of being a center and a winger is definitely something. You have that with some other guys, though, already kind of hanging around. I think he's going to spend most of his time with the Firebirds, with the exception of injuries. I don't even know that he would be the healthy scratch forward option that this group is going to go with over, say, a John Hayden.
Yeah, I think Hayden would probably be ahead of him. I will see what training camp dictates, but I think Hayden would probably be ahead of him. But I think you will see him for some games because injuries happen. It's a matter of when, not if. So I think you'll see him in a Kraken jersey at some point, but probably not for very long.
Yeah.
And now, as for Yanni Newman, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and then also, you have other options hanging around like Logan Morrison. Has he done enough to kind of become a more regular NHL player and stuff there? And so there's going to be other guys in the mix that realistically probably have a little bit more upside than Beniers.
Yep. And younger guys too. Good to get those reps. So speaking of younger guys, though, Yanni Newman. So that's someone we really haven't discussed as far as lineup for the Kraken this season. Yeah. I think we both expect him to just be a fixture in Coachella Valley. Odds that he can break look, he's got the size. He still has a lot to work on skating wise, but do you think he gets a look in Seattle, at least for a little bit?
This year? No.
This year. Yeah, no, I wouldn't think so either.
And I base that both on my kind of opinion and also based on all of the messaging that the team has given us, right? Like, they are very excited for him to come over and spend time with the Firebirds with a full season in North America, adjusting to the North American game, adjusting to the lifestyle, the language, all of that kind of stuff. It's very obvious that they are excited for him to finally be over here and playing with the Firebirds. They're going to keep him there. There's no reason to rush him. And also the skating is a massive concern. From an NHL level perspective, his skating is just not there. And it's proven to kind of be there at the AHL level, but realistically he's going to need more time. He specifically is one of the big reasons why I was kind of like, hey, maybe Jess Campbell takes over AHL coaching responsibilities and she can work with Yanni Newman, because I think that would be really beneficial for Yanni Newman. But right now Yanni Newman has an incredible shot, nobody's denying that, has really good instincts for where to go, certainly has the size and the big body to one day become a power forward. But one of the things that power forwards all kind of have is they are sneaky good skaters in certain ways. You got to have like good edge work. You have to have really good lower body strength and all of that kind of stuff. And Yanni Newman has struggled with that at times, and has struggled with that at the AHL level. And if you were to take him, the number one difference between AHL and NHL for me and a lot of other people, if you were to ask them, is skating. And so if he's already kind of in the mid to lower half of the AHL, to bring him up to the NHL, it would just be too rough for him, I think.
Yeah, and the Kraken, we've already seen early on, organizationally, they do not like to rush their younger prospects. And so that would kind of go against their whole philosophy and you really don't need to do it. You don't need that boost at the NHL level, even if he is a boost, if they do believe that. But still, I just don't think it's worth kind of rushing him there. So next question, and we had multiple people wondering about this, Daniel and Brandon, asking about the Coachella Valley goalie situation for next year, because there's a few names involved. Do you think Saarinen could be there now that he's signed? I mean, what's the goalie situation looking like? So Ron Francis clarified that Steska's going to be the starter there,
yep,
for sure. But then you also have Nicholas Koko. You have Kim Saarinen, who just signed his ELC. Kind of where do we expect him to be? Victor Ostman, also in the organization, signed a deal. So what do we expect that backup spot in Coachella Valley to look like?
Well, I mean, Ron was pretty clear about it, right? It sounds like it's Nicholas Koko's to start, but then it's Koko and Ostman, right, that are going to potentially flip-flop between being the backup in Coachella Valley and being the starter for the Mavericks, just based on getting them playing time. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter that if one is playing at the ECHL level versus the AHL level, as long as they're getting the reps. But it sounded like, based on Ron talking to us, that it was going to be Koko who kind of gets that first shot at being the AHL backup.
And that makes sense given the draft capital that the Kraken spent on him and him being the top goalie in the organization as far as the prospects go.
Yeah.
So that's what I see as well. And then, as for Saarinen, I mean, because I think he even though he signed his ELC, he can just go back to Finland.
Yeah, he's going back to Finland. I would expect nothing less. I mean, he's still 17. Like he's not coming over right away. And also, I don't know what his contract. Well, I guess he's not under contract with anybody in Finland if he signed his ELC, or is it possible that he's still under contract for another year there?
I wonder. Yeah, I don't know
when did Coco sign? Did Coco have to wait until his deal was up?
I don't. Well, because he must have
of 2023. So no.
Yeah, no, he didn't.
Yeah,
so yeah, you can be under contract with both. It's fine.
Yeah. So the bottom line is, Nicholas Coco had an incredible run this past season over there in Finland, and that kind of earned him the ability to come over. But it is not unusual for European goalies to take several years before they make the trek over to North America. And this is something Ron talked about. You just have such limited spots in North America for your goaltenders. Right. And I almost wonder about this with the Kraken taking so many European goalies, just because it's really hard if you were to take a bunch of North American goalies just to find spots for them to play. And as he talked about, it's more important for them to be playing games than even the level at which they are playing. And so if that is really what matters, is just them getting playing time, you don't want to bring everybody over to North America where essentially you only have two starting spots. It doesn't make sense to load them all up there. You're struggling to try to get everybody playing time. It just doesn't really make a ton of sense. So I would not expect Saarinen until somebody graduates out of the system, realistically, right? Like if Coco's going to take 2 years, say, at the AHL level before he's an NHLer, which would be pretty standard, I would say, then you wait until Coco's ready to graduate to the NHL level in 2 years, and then you bring Saarinen over to take over kind of what Coco was doing at the AHL level, right? Like that would be kind of a standard way in which teams handle this sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if that's how the Kraken handle it. So, question here from Helena asking, where can we expect Berkeley Katton to play in the upcoming season? And when can we expect him to play for the Kraken? So this is the first of a few Berkeley Katton and prospect-related questions here. So as far as where we can expect him to play in the upcoming season, that one's pretty simple, and that at least to start, barring a trade in juniors, the Spokane Chiefs. He's going back to juniors. But Dylan, I mean, you have mentioned the idea to me at Dev Camp or in other places, right? Do you think he gets a look at the NHL level to start? Because, by the way, for those who are unfamiliar with how this works, Berkeley Katton signed his entry-level contract. He's on his ELC, but that contract can slide to next year, and we'll slide over to next year so you get an extra year of it if he plays less than 10 NHL games. So he can get a 9-game little window at the NHL level this season if the Kraken want to do that to start the year before sending him down to Spokane. What do you think the odds of that are? Because I think you mentioned to me, right, Dylan, that if not for his size, you think he might even get that look this year.
Yeah, and I do think size is the only thing that's kind of keeping him from being able to make that jump right now, because he's smart enough to make the jump. He's skilled enough to make the jump. He can skate well enough to make the jump. I know a lot of people at Dev Camp talking about his skating, but again, he was just nervous day one. His skating was fine the rest of Dev Camp. He checks all the boxes but size. And so if I'm the Kraken, just based on him being the kind of player that you ultimately need in the organization, somebody who's just capable of producing a ton of points, somebody who is just a high-end skilled player, somebody who likes to attack in transition. I talked about this last week, kind of how he fits in with what it seems like the Kraken's long-term plan and approach as an organization is. I would certainly give him a good, strong look through training camp. And yeah, if he showed well through training camp, go ahead, give him a game or two at the NHL level, reward him, send the message to everybody in the prospect pool, right, that this is possible. If you show up and you put in the work and you look good, we will reward you. And really, it's also because he has nothing left to prove at the major junior level, right? Like, he is going to have to go back to major junior because that's the way the system works, and because the Kraken are so crowded at forward. But realistically, after putting up 116 points in 68 games last year, he doesn't need to prove anything there. So you don't need to rush him back there. If he misses a couple weeks with the Chiefs, it's not going to ruin his development, right? Like, he's going to hit the ground running there. He's going to put up stupid numbers there. We know that. So yeah, I think if he's able to look good in the preseason games, look good through training camp, go ahead, give him a game or two, just to kind of get that experience. Let him see the speed of the NHL. That's going to be the big one, just so that doesn't shock him come, say, next season. I would be totally on board with that. And then also, I would expect a player of his ability to at some point be traded this upcoming season in Major Junior to a team that is going to be looking to make a Memorial Cup run. That's just kind of the way this goes with guys that are going to have limited time frames left in Major Junior and put up stupid numbers like that. They're too valuable if you're a team to just hold on to one and let them graduate in a year. You got to kind of get a massive return for them, and I think Berkeley Katton would get a massive return for the Chiefs.
Yes, I mean, you'll see him probably traded for something like 10 different draft picks because that's how things work in juniors. Yeah. So that's what I would expect to see too. I hope that couple games in the NHL option is on the table if he steps up and earns it in training camp. But again, that all just relies on how he looks in training camp. So that'll be one of the storylines that we're gonna look for then. So staying on the topic of Berkeley Katton, but moving forward a little bit into the future, this question from Gaby. Gaby's asking, stylistically, is there any other Squid prospect more highly suited to playing on a line with Shane than Berkeley Katton? Also, let's say 3 years down the line, we have Kat at wing, Shane as his center. Who in this hypothetical is the third guy to complete the line? So I'm going to be leaning on you pretty heavily with this one, Dylan. You're the prospects guy. Maybe even a little hint of the kind of thing you might be asked in the prospect chat tonight. Really. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, I mean, he does fit very well with the idea of Shane Wright, in the sense that Shane Wright's going to need distributors on the outside. Berkeley Katton can absolutely do that. Berkeley Katton's the kind of guy that, especially with Shane, where he likes to find those really good, like, little tight windows to open things up. In the slot, Berkeley Katton's the kind of guy with the small panic zone. He can hold on to the puck for a really long time, be surrounded by 2 or 3 other guys. He knows how to wait and then thread the needle and get it to his guy. I would say that, yes, I agree. Berkeley Katton is the best kind of guy to be the long-term running mate for Shane Wright. If we hadn't seen like Ryan Winterton be Shane Wright's running mate in Coachella Valley and them kind of figure out an interesting dynamic where Shane Wright almost uses his skills and ability to open up spots kind of net side for Ryan Winterton. And I really like the dynamic that those two kind of had going, where it constantly kept defenses guessing, just as they were both kind of just bullying their way down the middle and kind of right towards the net. And I think that is an interesting thing. I don't know that it works as well at the next level, at the NHL level, where defensemen are kind of more apt to deal with something like that and a lot more physical. But I would say that Berkeley Katton's kind of right there with Ryan Winterton, and that's really saying something considering Shane Wright and Ryan Winterton basically have a season of experience with each other. So the fact that I am putting Berkeley Katton kind of right there with Ryan Winterton means a lot, considering I haven't seen them, and I've seen a lot of Winterton, Shane Wright. As for go for it.
Go ahead.
No, I was
Who's the third guy on the wing?
There's that one. Third guy on the wing, Chalet. I mean, Chalet's just so skilled that I think he just needs to be paired with skilled players, and I think that works, right? Like those guys, if Chalet's able to develop chemistry, like I could see even like Berkeley Katton and Chalet, if Katton stays down the middle, the two of them working just extremely well together because they kind of think the game in similar ways, as far as working very much off of instinct and working very much off of what the defense is giving them, versus like a Shane Wright who we know what he wants to do. Right, like he's going to go down the middle. He wants to get the puck there. He wants to take his shot and kind of score from there. Berkeley Katton and Chalet both, they surveil what's in front of them, and then they go ahead and make a move. So I kind of like them together. So maybe Chalet, if not Chalet, then Rykov, just because like he could play with anybody.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say Chalet's name, because after kind of a rough first year of development in the organization, I just feel like at some point down the line, just he needs to be in a position to succeed. Once he gets to the NHL level, put him in a good position, and that sounds like a good position for success.
Yeah, you want to know like best position for success? This is probably like the ultimate skill line that the Kraken could put together prospect wise. It would be Katton down the middle with Chalet and Rykov on wing, because Katton and Chalet could just cook and Rykov could just be a great like back checking through the neutral zone kind of guy with the skill level to finish whatever those guys kind of send his way as well. Like that would be like a really interesting dynamic group for the Kraken. It's just because the Kraken have so many centers already existing down the middle, I don't think we'll ever see it.
Yep. No, there's a lot of those. So next question related to some guys we've just been talking about. So I'll go into this one from Brandon. Brandon says, Katton, Newman, Rakoff, in that order, are our most important and will have the biggest Kraken impact of all prospects. Tell everyone why I'm right and Newman is a boss, excluding Wright on this.
Okay, so yes, excluding Shane Wright, I think we're all just of the mindset that he's graduated at this point. So it was what, Katton first, which I agree with, right? Like Katton is the one. He fits the style that the organization's moving to. He's also just the best one. Like outside of Shane Wright, Berkeley Katton is just the best player in the system now. Was it Newman second?
Yes, and then Rakoff third.
I don't know that I would do that. I don't know that I can do that just because Newman for me long term projects as more of a situational player. He's going to be great on the power play. He's got a really good shot, but like he's going to be realistically a middle six guy just because of his skating and the other aspects of his game. And so I don't know that he has that kind of high end, like first line potential the way a Rakoff could sneak in as like the third guy on a line, maybe on the first pairing, just because he has the high end skill, but then he has such responsibility the rest of the way. Or Chalet, where again he just has the high end skill that he could really, if he pairs well with a center, he could really do something higher up. I just think Yanni Newman's is just always going to be more limited than that, and so I don't know that I can agree with say 2 and 3 there on the list.
Yeah, no, understandable there, and I'm excited for Newman to see what he can bring, but I don't know that number 2. That's a little high for him. So the Kraken do have a lot of great prospects, though, as we talked about, right? So transitioning on to the next question here. So this one reminds me of the moment from The Simpsons where Abe Simpson sends in the letter, right? Dear Mr. President, there are too many states nowadays. Please eliminate 3. I am not a crackpot. So Dylan, there are too many prospects nowadays. Please eliminate 3. Kraken GM, who's asking this question, is not a crackpot. So the question is, which 3 Kraken prospects would you consider trading for immediate help who would provide value for other teams but not derail the Kraken's long-term future too much? Which 3 are you getting rid of?
All right. Well, if you are a Patreon member and you've attended my prospect chats in the past, number 1 probably doesn't surprise you, and that's Jagger Firkus. I think
he'd have to be at the top of the list.
His value is sky high right now. I have doubts about his long-term NHL potential and his ability to ever get kind of large enough to play at the NHL consistently, and strong enough to play at the NHL consistently. And even if he was, he would have to then be in limited situations, I think. So Jagger Firkus first and foremost, and that's really one where you might have to do that sooner rather than later. I know it's not popular as an opinion, but I think I would go there. The other ones, I mean, like I said, I have situational concerns about Yanni Newman, but I don't know that I'd get rid of that shot out of the prospect pipeline. I guess I might throw Chalet in there just because Chalet is super skilled, and I could see a team really falling in love with the idea of pairing him with, like, say, their existing high-end centerman at the NHL level, and they need somebody on an ELC. So I think Chalet has potentially more value to somebody else than he does necessarily in the Kraken system, just because we haven't seen him with one of Matty or Shane for any extended period of time, and so I just don't know that he has chemistry with them. So it's kind of just like, I have to say a name, and so Chalet's that one just for those reasons. The other one, and this would be after he graduates to the NHL level and has produced for a couple seasons, and then it becomes just basically a cap casualty, and that would be Oscar Fisker-Molgaard. Like, can't you see? Yeah, I think I could see like a situation.
He's your boy, though.
I know he's my boy, and I'm saying he's going to play too well at the NHL level for the Kraken to potentially keep him. Is a scenario that I could see where he's going to be a great, like, bottom six guy, and then the Kraken, assuming all these other guys hit for them, where you're having to pay Shane Wright, you're having to pay Matty Beniers, you're having to pay Berkeley Katton, you're having to pay a Chalet and a Goyette or a Newman. He just becomes expendable at that point, just because you can't afford to keep him as a very highly paid, and deservedly so, say, third line guy.
Okay, I see where your logic
is
but
that
still in
I'm
3
also
years
twisting
or so,
I'm also twisting the spirit of the question a lot there.
Yes,
yes.
Yeah. I was gonna say to get trading for immediate help.
All right, immediate help.
Immediate
help. Furcus, I think he's absolutely at the pinnacle. Yanni Newman, if there's a team that does think he can be more than a situational type player, then again you're trading him kind of at the best value he's ever going to have, and I would be okay with that because I think he only has situational value. And then after that, Ryan Winterton, because you just don't have a spot down the middle, and if another team thinks he can be a center, you can get good value for him too. So there you go. I'll answer the real question.
There we go. I held Dylan to account there, Kraken GM. So I made him actually answer the question. So this one, though, I think you have answered it in some form on previous prospect chats. But with another dev camp, with more time, right, your opinion could always change. CJ asks, who do you see as the better long-term homegrown defensive prospect based on what you see of their game currently? Caden Price or Ville Ottavainen?
After this dev camp, I think it's probably Caden Price. Caden Price showed up, and he played extremely well. I was already kind of I was at times saying that I felt like Caden Price is the best prospect, best defensive prospect for the Kraken, and I do think that if you're talking about projection, I think he is. I think Ty Nelson is better currently, but I think Caden Price has the ability to pass him as he continues to get older and everything. And then especially when we talked with Caden Price, just him talking about being healthy for a full season and how much that allowed him to work on and how much better he was able to get over the course of this past season versus his draft year where he was injured for so much of it. Like that I think plays into a role too. Like Caden Price just has a lot of runway left to still grow, whereas Ottavainen, he largely looks like the same player I saw last year to this year, right? This past season from the previous season. And so I think he's kind of maxed out at what he can be, and I think that that's realistically a bottom pairing NHL defenseman if he was to be at the NHL level. And so I think that's the difference for me, is that Caden Price has the ability, in my opinion, to be a second pairing NHL defenseman. Ottavainen is a bottom pairing defenseman.
I agree with Ottavainen being a bottom pair. I basically agree with that whole assessment of where they project, and so I'll agree with your answer on this. But I will push back a little bit on. Look, I love Ottavainen's game. I've been an Ottavainen believer from the start.
Yeah.
And that he's going to be a great third pairing defenseman, someone who can punish people in front of the net. But the step forward I saw this season that I wasn't even expecting really was what he was able to do with the Firebirds in terms of moving the puck and point production. Because this is never a guy that's going to score a bunch for you, but he had 8 goals and 34 points in Coachella Valley last year. And I know a lot of that is making passes that kind of, feed off onto the rush and Dan's system and everything. I know that isn't all him just kind of headmanning the puck himself, but still that's more production than I ever expected from him at the AHL level. And so it makes me, I guess, even more certain that I think we're going to, I think we're going to see him for a couple NHL games this season, or a few. If the blue line stays as healthy as it has been, then we're not. But if there is maybe 2 injuries, take 3 injuries.
It's a lot.
I want to see him get a few games in, because I think he's ready for it. Because I wasn't expecting that big of a step last year, and I think he would be ready for some NHL games this year. But there's too many bodies in front of him. But I don't know. I'm still a big believer in him.
Yeah, and that is true. I thought he had the potential to do that offensively. Like I talked about that last year with him. Like I felt like he is smooth, and his ability to puck handle and then keep his head up is what's really impressive about all that, right? Because yes, a lot of the assists come from those breakouts, but there's been a lot of them where he's been walking the blue line and he's been able to find an open player in a good spot, and it's all because he keeps his head up. That's also how you get 8 goals as a defenseman, right? It's because you have your head up and you see the seas just parted and now I have this opportunity to take a shot from the point here, right? Like that's the aspect of his game that is really impressive. He had that previously. It's just that he was bottom line is he played infinitely more games this past season. So I feel like he was able to show it in that sense from a counting stat standpoints, because he played more than 2 games. It's a lot easier to to put up points when you're not playing 2 games. But I will give you that. I just think that his skating and his defensive game and all of that kind of stuff is kind of maxed out, and it's it's like I said, it's bottom pairing NHLer versus Caden Price that I think is going to have all of that same dynamic offensive upside, but also potentially has more defensive upside too.
Yeah, the upside is definitely higher with Price. I will give you that. All right, so last question on the prospect front, but this one is a little different. This one from Tim, and this is a good question. I'm not really sure how ELCs work, and I'm curious why Saarinen, the 88th overall pick, who the Kraken just signed to his ELC recently, would get $975,000 AAV, and Dominic Badinka, who was picked 34th overall, would only get $869,000. So that is a good question. ELCs, entry-level contracts, there are prescribed maximums for how much a player can get paid on their entry-level deal. But as far as the actual money, that is all negotiable, and it is based on individual situations. And so sometimes you will see a later draft pick making more on their ELC than an earlier draft pick. And really, it all just comes down to individual circumstances. And sometimes it's with bringing a player over from Europe, can you entice them to do that, give them extra money? Sometimes it's a positional thing. Maybe, as a goalie, you're going to get more than a skater. It's really all down to individual circumstances. And now the reason the system is that way from the beginning basically is because owners, GMs basically don't want to pay a first overall draft pick the same as they pay a 7th round draft pick. And that all just kind of makes sense. But as a result, it's all kind of negotiable there. And so you will see the highest end draft pick signed for the maximum and with the maximum performance bonuses and all of that stuff. But you won't see it. It's not like a scale, like I believe the NFL, right? Dylan has kind of a scale and a pre-prescribed,
they have more of a scale,
contract for every draft position versus at the NHL, it's just all negotiable and individual.
Yeah, and you can just look at the Kraken last year, right? Chalet is making less than Rykhoff and Molgaard, who were picked in the 2nd round of the same draft.
Yep. It's just all down to individual circumstances.
Get a better agent, I guess. That's
yep.
The answer. It also has to do with like
usually the differences aren't all that great too. It's
Yeah.
usually pretty small differences in money.
Yes, and like that is the case here with these guys, and really like with Molgaard and Rykhoff making more than Chalet, it's because of when they signed their contracts. Like Chalet signed last year, the other 2 guys signed this year. Well, everything goes up in sports, right? Like that, like basically the difference in the money is just that. Now I know the other situation isn't quite like that, but it sometimes comes down to situations like that too. What a 2nd round pick got last year is what, a 1st round pick got the year before or whatever. So
yeah, no, that could definitely happen. So good question there, Tim, though, because it did make us kind of look at some examples that we wouldn't have otherwise looked at, just to make sure we had researched that one properly, because it made us think. So good question there, Tim. So moving on to the bigger picture for the Kraken, we talked about a lot of the details of the roster and everything, but let's look at next season from a larger perspective, right? Question from Legion, and this is a big one. What would you consider a successful season for the Kraken? Legion says, I see them as a fringe playoff team. Likewise, what would be a successful season for Matty and Shane? I'd like to see 60 plus points for each. Might be a little aggressive there since we don't know lines. So we'll start with the team in general. What would you consider a successful season for the Kraken?
Yeah, just being in the playoff conversation through February, I'd take, right? Like even if you wait until then to kind of fall off, I think that would be very successful after the year we just had.
I'm going to aim a little bit higher here. I think, well, first of all, Ron Francis has set the bar for this, and he said it every season. And I ask him pretty much every year, what is success for you? And he says the same thing every year, actually, to the point where I've stopped asking because I know what he's going to say. And it's make the playoffs. Mm-hmm. That is the expectation for this team every single season, is make the playoffs. And given the moves they made in the offseason, signing Montour and Stevenson, that seems like the goal. It seems like a fair expectation. And I know looking at this team, and we'll talk about it a little bit more with the next question and really in depth when we get to training camp, division preview, all of that. This looks like a playoff bubble team that could easily be on either side of the bubble. But okay. Do you disagree with me there a little bit?
Keep going, and then I'll talk.
Okay. But playoffs aren't assured. I think we can agree on that.
Yeah.
I think it's a fair expectation.
Yes.
Because we're not talking about what we think that they're going to do, but what would success be given the context of everything. And I think if they miss the playoffs, just about everybody in the organization is going to view that as not a successful season. And I think that's fair at this point for us to hold them to account on that.
See, I don't know that it would if they're in it till basically the end.
Well, you said February.
Well,
I think
I said through February, so essentially March,
okay.
which means there's a month and a half left, right? Like
no,
I want them
the last week of the season.
Okay,
they need to be in it until the very last week.
Look, I will agree.
Anything
with you.
less than that?
Yeah, I agree with you that playoff expectation is fair, but I don't know that it's totally realistic. Right, just because
I could agree on that. Yeah.
Right. Just because of where this team is, I think based on the moves and stuff that they made this offseason and the messaging that they've had this offseason, obviously you want to turn things around, but I really think because of the unique struggles that existed last year, just in terms of player production, locker room, whatever, motivation, the culture that was starting to form, all of those things. I think if you're just a very competitive team that's kind of right in there till the end, but everybody finishes strong, everybody enjoys playing, the team makes improvements, the young guys make improvements over the course of the year, guys regress back up to like kind of normal production. I think at the end of the day, yes, it would be disappointing not to make the playoffs, but I do think that the organization could walk away from that feeling like, look, we at least got it all back on track. Like this thing was really getting off the rails the last couple months of the previous season. We got things back on track. We're right on the cusp there. We've made ourselves maybe a little bit more of a destination for free agencies for that next offseason. Shane Wright's got a full year under his belt. Playoffs next year are going to be assured for us kind of moving forward, right? Like I feel like the organization could be okay with that internally if it's just that everything that you needed to correct all got corrected.
Yes, if all of that is the case, and it kind of gets to the second half of this question. If Matty and Shane are able to, if Matty's able to turn things around and it looks more like he's the player that won the Calder than the player we saw last season, if Shane looks legit at the NHL level and you have that feeling that the playoffs are pretty much assured next year, then I guess it's okay if you just barely miss out, but you're still in it into the last week, then maybe that's okay. But given that, I mean, really what informs my thinking on this too is just the two big free agent signings with Stevenson and Montour, where those deals are never going to look better than they do year one. You know what I mean? They're going to kind of be declining throughout the whole deals. And the reason you sign those deals and the reason that you devote so much cap space to those contracts is to help you get things back on track this year.
Yeah.
And so that's why I put that emphasis and get to the playoffs this year.
Well, see, I guess that's the difference is I consider back on track meaning that everything else has gone right and all of the issues from last season are erased, right? I would consider that enough of getting back on track. I don't think you have to return to the playoffs for it to then be considered a success, but I very much understand the idea of you needing it to be the playoffs. But like if they improve from an 81-point team to a 95-point team, are we going to say that the season wasn't a success and they miss it by like 4 points? Like, no, we're all going to feel like after that, we're going to be like, wow, we're back. The future's bright. We're cooking. The team is cooking. Dan was the right coaching hire. The young guys are looking better. Like, I think we're going to walk away from that feeling okay.
I think you're right about that. And I guess really, and not to make things negative again here, but it really just opens up the possibility that, and it's kind of scary to think about, that everything can go right for this group. A lot can go right, everything that needs to, right, to be long-term back on track, and they still miss the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I think that says some scary things about how this group is built and what we should be looking at for next season. But that's something to get to for a later time, really. That like how much they're relying on going right in order to actually get to the playoffs.
Right. Well, but I mean, again, putting on my realist hat, like how many times have I brought up like the individual production here? You had 2 20-goal scorers, right? Like that is what you're working with. That's your starting point for this upcoming season. You had 2 guys get to 20 goals. If you double that and get to 4 guys getting to 20 goals, you still might not be a playoff team, but boy, if you're feeling a lot better about the group. You had 2 players get to 50 points. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's really like, no, like, but it is true, right? Like this is realistically what the team was this past season. So like that is realistically what this team is working with. And yeah, that tells you that all of this could go right and it is still potentially not a playoff team. Like that's just the realistic situation that this team finds itself in.
Yeah. So I think to close it off, I think you nailed it earlier when you said that it's playoffs are a reasonable expectation, but
fair
not
expectation,
necessarily a realistic one.
Yeah.
So
I think that's the way. I want
yeah.
minimum 12-point improvement standings points wise.
Yeah, at the very least, yes.
Yeah. So like that's, and then when you're talking about that, you're talking about them being a playoff bubble team.
Yeah. All right. So on to the second half of this question. As far as Matty and Shane, Legion would like to see 60 plus points for each, but that might be a little aggressive. Just pure production wise, what do you think would be a successful season for both Matty and Shane? And I know a lot of that depends on the lines, the context in which they play, what roles they're given. But what would you like to see from those two?
Because Matty should be, at least for the vast majority of the season, a top 6 player, I think 50 points is what I would like to get Matty back up to. And I know, like, again, that would make him third on this team in scoring last year, right? Like, you're talking about a lot, but realistically, the expectations for him should be a lot if he can get it back on track.
He's done it. He's scored 57 points
right.
2 seasons ago.
And he has done it. And I think a lot of these guys are going to have better production. Like, they're going to kind of, like I said, regress back to a more mid, a little bit better than half a point per game production, which is basically what everybody gave you last year. So I think 50 points for Matty Beniers is not unrealistic, and it's not too much either. So I kind of have Matty at the 50-point range, somewhere in that 15 to 20 goal range. Like I think that's, again, reasonable to expect him. Even if you said 20 goals, 50 points, I think that's very reasonable for Matty Beniers. Shane Wright's going to be interesting just because he's going to be getting third line minutes, so you can kind of walk it off. Like I'd love to say the same for Shane Wright, but just realistic, I don't know that it is. 40 seems also at the same time maybe a little low for Shane Wright to say. So let's say like 45 points for Shane Wright, maybe.
I was going to bump it down from 50 to 45. And so, although I want to make the distinction between realistic and successful, I still think 50 points for Matty Beniers would be successful because it shows he can get back to that roughly Calder level. For Shane, I stand by my 45. I still think 45 would be kind of the level where if he can put up that kind of production at the NHL level, even though it's not ultimately what you want his ceiling to be, that has shown, basically I'm looking for production that shows that, okay, he can be a legitimate scorer at the NHL level. He's just 20, so this isn't where his end point is, but something that shows that, okay, he can score here. Those 5 points in 8 games last season were not just an aberration.
Right. And it's it means he worked his way through the rookie wall that he will hit at some point, right? Like there's going to be a stretch in time where he's going to go like 10 games without having something. Like that's just the way this goes for everybody. It means that if he's able to be a half point per game player over his first full NHL season, and as a guy getting kind of more third line minutes, if he's going to get like 13 and a half to 14 minutes, I just think that is very successful for him if he can get to 40, 45 points.
Yeah, certainly. If those are the minutes he's playing, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So moving ahead towards some roster move questions, we have this one from Gary. We have a ton of guys with expiring contracts next season. Who, if any of them, do you see Ron wanting to keep? So yeah, there's a lot of potential roster turnover after this season as we kind of look ahead to the guys on expiring deals. We got Yanni Gourde, we got Brandon Tanev. We have, and these are the UFAs, the RFAs, like, a Ty Cartier, it's a different situation. But the big ones are Gourde, Tanev, Larson, Borgen, and Joey Daccord. Yeah, so that's a big situation there too. We also had a question from Brandon about Joey being the last year of the contract and what that situation is too. So, but I don't know. Shall we start with the forwards? Let's start with the forward situation here. As far as Yanni Gourde, I think probably unlikely they bring him back. We just talked about him slotting in potentially on the fourth line. I think that's kind of the end of the road for his time in Seattle after this season. And depending on how they do in the standings, like if it's a disappointing year, he's probably moved to the trade deadline. Mm-hmm. There's just not room for him at center with Matty, Shane, and Stevenson. It's that simple. Tanev, I mean, I'm kind of surprised he wasn't moved this offseason, so I wouldn't really expect him to come back. Do you disagree with either of those two?
Nope.
And then for the blue line, and that's really where it gets interesting because the Kraken only have really I actually have 4 regular defensemen under contract for next season. But with Larson and Borgen's contracts ending, those are 2 big names on the blue line they're going to either have to bring back or replace in some way. I'll defer to you on Larson, Dylan, because he's Adam Larson, best defenseman. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Do you think Ron's going to be interested in bringing him back?
If he bounces back this upcoming season, if he plays again kind of the way he played last season, I don't know that you would, because then again, if you're bringing him back, you're probably bringing him back to keep him paired with Vince Dunn to eat a bunch of big minutes. And the bottom line was there were several times in which he was a liability for you, especially on the penalty kill. And that's, if that continues for this upcoming season, you could probably go out there and find a different guy who can be a penalty kill specialist, who can chew up 20 minutes a night and come in for you. That might end up being a little bit better. It would suck to lose his leadership on the blue line. I still think that's a valuable component, and I could see Ron weighing that. So if Larson bounces back, I could see them being interested in bringing back Larson. If also Larson will be 32 at that point, is willing to take maybe lesser term. Like the $4 million isn't that much. You could even bump it up to 4.5 or 5 just because the cap has gone up. But if he wants more than say 2 years of term, I don't know that Ron's going to want to bring him back.
I think that's the key. And the situation I like it to is maybe Jordan Eberle, where he's on the older side. The production maybe isn't going to be as high as it was. But if he's willing to take a short-term deal, like a 2-year deal at a reasonable cap hit, he's someone that you certainly could bring back and would be great to have in the room and also on the ice at the right role. But again, if he has another season like last year, 32, maybe it's time to cut bait and look for other options because they can be found on the market. So the other one is Will Borgen. So somebody who's a little bit younger, still kind of on the upswing as a defenseman, but will also be a UFA. So he'll be free to sign with any team if that contract expires. This is a tough one because I think even more than Larson, this one just depends on what he's able to do next season. I think he's going to get a little bit more ice time. His ice time has just been bumped up each year since he's joined the team. I think it's going to be the real test of.
You do? If we're talking about him being on the bottom pair?
I mean, injuries potentially, but I guess, because that's right. He was on the second pair.
He was on the second pair last year.
I guess with Montour there, maybe not.
Sorry, I just
No, you're right. I hadn't
continue.
Yeah. So maybe that does lend to him being somebody who's more expendable too, especially because he's going to cost a lot more than the 2.7 he's making right now. I think some team will definitely give him more money than that because he's big, he's physical. We've seen how much teams covet that, and it sounded like teams were calling about him really at various points over the last couple seasons, even at the deadline last year. He's the kind of defenseman that GMs love. And I don't know that if he's going to stay on the third pair. Yeah, because you look at the right side and you've got Montour and then, Larson, maybe iffy. I don't know. Do you basically you'd have to see him as a top 4 defenseman. You'd have to see him as a second pairing defenseman for you on the right side.
Right.
To bring him back.
And you'd have to match what other teams are going to be willing to pay for him. And I just don't think that the Kraken will. Like, I think that's going to be the ultimate key. It doesn't matter how much Ron likes him. I think just the fact that you already have 2 defensemen on the books that are making over $7 million. You're going to have to sign another potential top pairing defenseman to go with Vince Dunn, whether that's re-upping Larson or bringing in somebody else. I just don't think the money's going to be there to match, say, a $4.5-5 million offer that somebody's going to give Will Borgen.
Yeah, and I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know that Borgen would take less to stay either.
I don't
You look at this deal that he's on right now, even though 2.7 is very reasonable for what he is, it exceeded expectations for what the projections were for that contract. And this is his chance to get paid.
Exactly.
This is your time where you're heading to free agency at a prime age. You have to take the opportunity to take the most money you can.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Now, onto the goalie situation, and we'll kind of transition over to Brandon's question here. How do we see the goalie situation shaking out after this year? And more than anybody else that we talked about, this one really depends on how the player plays. For Joey Daccord, was last season for real? Was that legit? Is that who he is? Or was it an aberration? Goaltending is so hard to predict. I have no clue what he's going to do next year. Nobody does. But if he follows it up with another really strong season, then it gets interesting because you have Grubauer still under contract for another 2 years. You would then probably want to try and re-sign Joey because at that point he'd be your starter. What do you do?
I love that you say it depends on how the player plays, and I was going to say, oh yeah, it does. It depends on how well Philip Grubauer plays. Joey's contract,
maybe more than that, yeah.
Let's be real. Joey's contract depends on Philip Grubauer. Joey, I think, should be able to do what he did last year again. I think he's going to be able to repeat that. I think he is locked in, dialed in. He's figured out everything. That's what's important for a goaltender. I think he's there. As far as is he going to be borderline top 10, 5 goaltender like he was last year? Probably not. But as far as being a very reasonable starter, capable of winning you games, posting a 9-10 plus save percentage, all that kind of stuff, Joey's there. It all comes down to Philip Grubauer, right? Because that's really the situation that you have to look at if you're the Kraken and it comes to contracts for your goalies. Is just what am I doing with Philip Grubauer? Does Philip Grubauer bounce back and play well enough that come next season, you don't maybe look at a buyout that seems very reasonable on paper if you look at it and use that money to then bring back Joey Daccord and stuff. If Philip Grubauer really kind of takes the reins back and is your guy and the guy, I don't know that then, what you do with Joey realistically. Because this is, again, just like with Will Borgen, next offseason will be the opportunity for Joey to get paid. So if Joey plays well at all, he's going to go out there and have the ability to enter the market in which he can get paid and go somewhere as the presumptive starter or very much in a spot where he can reasonably expect to win that job. And so, if Grubauer plays well for you, then I just don't think Joey stays because why would he?
Right. I think you have to pick one goalie because you cannot have $10 million tied up in net. Just can't have it. And all it would take is Joey making 4.1, which again, if he has another strong season, he's going to make that at least.
Yeah.
You can't. So I think by the end of the season, you should know and you better know which goalie you want to go forward with. And I think their performance will dictate that. Yes. I think it'll be clear to all of us by that point which one they're going with. And I think you either then extend Joey and he's your starter and you buy out Grubauer and bring somebody else, or Grubauer is your starter. That's the one you're going with. And you have to let Joey walk. But I think it'll be clear by that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then also at the tail end of the question was, could Ron trade for the Nashville guy, meaning Yaroslav Askarov? I don't think so. He's going to be very expensive to acquire, and those assets, if you're going to trade for a difference maker, should go elsewhere. So I don't think that's on the table at all.
Yeah. Unless they're willing to do a Furcus for Askarov 1-for-1.
Oh, I would do that so fast, but there's no way Nashville should or would do that. So, any reasonable offer on the table, I don't think it would happen. But so transitioning to some off-ice stuff. So moving away from the lineup and all of that, CJ asking any rumors or updates on the skills competition coming back next season. So I know that's something that Kraken fans absolutely loved, the skills showcase. I loved it. It was one of my favorite days of the year. I have not heard anything on that for next year. I would imagine a decision probably has not been made on that yet for next year. I have hope, because this year with the Winter Classic, I would imagine that played a pretty big role in them not doing it this year. That's a lot of planning and just logistics that everyone had to deal with this year. And so it makes sense you wouldn't have the skills showcase on top of it. I will say the people who do make those decisions are aware of how popular it was and how much everybody loved it. and you have to think that'll weigh on their mind. And I'm really hoping it does come back, but sorry, CJ, I haven't heard anything on that yet.
Well, and the organization has also kind of, again, made moves this offseason that signal that they very much value the fans. They want to make sure that even if the product on the ice is not necessarily going to be as competitive a team as we all want it to be, that the fans are taken care of. So I would think that also bodes well to the idea of it hopefully coming back.
Yeah, so hopefully it will. Question here from Commodore Schmidlap.
Let's go.
Dylan, you get the reference. I do not.
Do.
So asking, what are the chances that the Kraken unveil an official third jersey this year? So far, each year of the Kraken's existence, we've gotten new jerseys. Year 1, home and aways. Year 2, reverse retro. And year 3, of course, the Winter Classic. Year 4, couple question marks there. Sorry to disappoint, but I think the chances are slim to none that they get another jersey this year. I think it's coming eventually. And I believe there was a...
I was just going to say, like, didn't Fanatics say, because Fanatics is taking over the jersey game for the whole NHL from Adidas this upcoming season, and I'm pretty sure Fanatics said next season, not like this upcoming season, but the one following, they're going to then have whatever their like large scale, every team gets a third jersey situation is going to be.
Yes, I think that is what I remember hearing. Yeah. So nothing this season, but next season, be on the lookout for it. I mean, the Kraken did have initial plans, from what I've heard, to launch a third jersey previously. It didn't happen because of was the reverse retro or the Winter Classic? I think it might have been because of the Winter Classic. It didn't happen, but they had a jersey design made and mocked up, and I have not seen it, but I know people who have seen it, and it was pretty much done, designed. A prototype was ready to go, and it was it was like an ice blue main color, had the Anchor logo on the front. That ended up not happening because of the other jersey reveals that came in instead. But I might expect something like that to happen whenever the next round of third jerseys happens. Changes could always be made, but if you're gonna have to put a bet on like a clubhouse leader for what it might look like, I'd say that would be it.
Yeah, and I guess there is a possibility of that coming this year. Like, it would be weird in a manufacturer's first season to be like, hey, can you also manufacture these third jerseys for us as you're getting used to everything else? But just because, like, if the Fanatics situation is going to be another league-wide initiative where the teams aren't as in charge of it, say like the reverse retro situation where it was every team's getting one of these, this is like a league mandated type thing that we're doing, and we're kind of overseeing everything, then I guess it is possible that then this year, if it's just left up to the team, maybe the team introduces a third jersey. It's just because the manufacturing and the whole jersey rights deal is changing that I think maybe not.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it this season, but yeah, you never know for next year or beyond. So this question from Sarah here, asking about Dave Hakstol, and so that's interesting. We haven't said his name in a little while.
I was going to say,
yeah, but ask about Dave Hakstol, and she read the article from Glenn Dreyfus with David Jones' Locker Room talking about Hakstol, maybe a potential return to NHL coaching, and was wondering if he does come back, where do we see him ending up, and what kind of role would be good for him at the NHL level. So first of all, Dave Hakstol really doesn't have any pressure to return to coaching right away. There's no time pressure on him. He's still being paid as part of that Kraken extension that he signed just last offseason, actually, just about a year ago.
Yeah, it's got 3 years.
That he signed. So yeah, so he still has the money coming in. So there's no financial pressure for him to get back to work right away. So he has the flexibility to take his time and find the right fit for him. But I don't know, what kind of situation do you think would be good for him and whatever team that would want to bring him in?
I think a return to being an assistant makes a lot of sense.
For sure.
For him, right? Like that's realistically, I think, what it's going to be. I think it's hard to break back in and get a third opportunity at being a head coach. Not too many of those guys kind of get that without having kind of more success on their resume, right? I say that as Dan Bylsma is coming back in for his third run as a head coach at the NHL level with the Kraken now. But he's got a Stanley Cup, so that buys you a lot of leeway. Dave Hakstol does not have that. And so I would be surprised if somewhere down the line he had another chance to kind of run a team. maybe if it's a situation where he's part of a staff and the head coach gets let go mid-season, he would be an obvious fit to be an interim guy, kind of see it through to the end. But I think realistically, assistant coaching at the NHL level, if he wants to, I have to imagine he would have offers on the table if he wanted to, say, go back to the NCAA, where he showed he had a lot of success at being able to build up a program, bring it to, Frozen Four appearances, all of that stuff. I think if he wants the opportunity to kind of run things himself, be the guy in charge, I could see him making a return to the college game.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think certainly if he wanted to go back to college, there would be openings for him. And especially with how prominent and really better college hockey has gotten than it used to be, the talent that is there now and how premier it is as far as, I don't want to say like junior hockey, but, hockey with younger players, right? Hakstol was excellent in that before coming to the NHL. I still think he'd be great at that, and could run a fantastic program. So if that's the route he wants to go, I think there would be plenty of schools that would love to have him.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. So we'll close things out with a couple of questions, maybe not so much about the Kraken, but about us. The Monastic, save these toward the end because I figured people wanted to hear about the Kraken stuff right away. But first one from Daniel asking, did you guys have any random run-ins or elevator or bus rides with any prospects at the draft? So I'll start by saying this. If you go to the draft, it is pretty impossible to not have some kind of run-in with a prospect or be on an elevator or see them at the hotel. That just happens. They are walking around everywhere. And we did talk about a few of these on the Red Glare podcast that came out yesterday, talking about the draft and our stories with the draft. But Dylan, I know you had more run-ins than I did. Any you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I guess the big ones were, I continually ran into Liam Greentree, just around the hotel and everything. From the moment I was checking in, he was also in line checking in with his Windsor Spitfire gear bag and his hockey sticks there. He was there with his family, his older brother, and a group of his older brother's friends. So me and my girlfriend ran into him there. And then we ran into him several other times over the next day and a half before the draft got going, around the hotel. Like all the prospects, he's just wandering around bored because he can't do anything in Vegas because he's 18. We talked about that yesterday on the Red Glare, how ridiculous it is to have all the prospects there in Vegas, and they're like 2 days away from becoming millionaires, and they can't do anything anywhere because they're not 21 yet. So it's an interesting situation. I will say him and his older brother, and his group of friends were having a very good time. I will say that. So Liam Greentree for sure, ran into him on several occasions. The other big one that was there at check-in and then also ran into several more times was Teddy Stiga, who went to Nashville in the second round. He was there while we were checking in, and that was a fun one because I didn't instantly recognize him. And he had the Team USA gear bag, so then it was like, okay, let's kind of see stuff. I saw which presumptive father figure he walked towards, and he was wearing a Boston Red Sox cap. So like me and my girlfriend are standing in line to check in, and I'm like, okay, so he's from the Boston area, probably like Northeast. Here we go, New England. Who could this be? Whatever. And it was Teddy Stiga, and I did see him walking through the next day with his friend who was staying with him. His friend was carrying a microwave, looking exhausted, and Teddy Stiga was carrying 2 cases of water with a very much just like I'm over this face. So I don't know what was going on for them there, but that was kind of the good one. And then like at the draft, we got lots of it, but that's because this time we were on the media side of things. So like we were literally in the hallway that every single prospect had to walk through in order to go do their interviews and come back. So lots of run-ins with prospects there, but not in the
so
same
random
way.
though.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one I'll add to that, we were on an elevator with Stan Solberg. So hearing the Norwegian being spoken there too it's always fun trying to figure out, okay, who is this? The Norwegian was a pretty clear giveaway, or at least pointed us in a direction.
Yes, and we did help father, coach, agent, some more middle-aged gentleman with him on how to get to the Sphere. So there you go.
Yep.
Because the signs are misleading.
Oh yes, they definitely are. No, we were part of a group that was just kind of trying to figure out how to get there, including some Kraken people as well. So that was fun. All right, so last question. We will close it out with this one from Viren, and this is an interesting one that really made me think about an answer. Was what do you see as your role / niche within the Kraken media landscape? Has that or anything else about this gig changed since you started? So, I mean, man, if you really get Dylan and I started, we could talk for like hours about this because there's so much that would fall under the umbrella of an answer to this. But I guess where do we want to begin? I guess our role / niche in the Kraken media landscape. Because for me, I think of kind of three things. I think of number one, the community that we have here. I think of the kind of, I mean, this is the deep dive podcast, but that taking that deeper dive on things as opposed to maybe the way that other podcasts. I think the Kraken media landscape is great because no matter what you're looking for, there's something for you.
Yeah.
There is somebody for you that does what you're looking for. But I think that's kind of our role. And then also like the post-game show, the interactive nature of it, which nobody else does it quite like that. So those are the three things I tend to think of, but I'm curious your thoughts on that, Dylan.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say first and foremost that we're independent. So there's that component to it, and then what separates us from the other independent entities out there, I would say, is the interactive component that has allowed us to foster the community, right? Like, I don't know that our community becomes what it is if we don't have the post-game lives where everybody's getting together and we all kind of, went through that difficult first season together, so many of us, and that kind of really formed like what the identity of that was going to be and what the identity of our community was going to be. Obviously, when you're doing something like that, you would love to have a community around it. And obviously you want it to be a supportive community, a community that's open to newer fans. That's something that was very important to us as well, is just not to be gatekeepy in a way that other hockey things can be. And I'm not saying like other Kraken hockey stuff, but in the larger context of the NHL, that's always a concern that I have anyway. So like we wanted to do that kind of stuff. I think, as far as like what changed, and this kind of fits in with how we ended up doing that other stuff and really why all of the different entities that cover the Kraken kind of have their own niche, is just because we were all throwing things at the wall to see what stuck. And for us, it was the post-game live. It was doing kind of deeper analysis on the podcast, right? Breaking down coaching systems like we're going to be doing on the Patreon over August and all of that kind of stuff, right? Kind of doing that. Me being able to come in with like the scouting background and speak about things from that vantage point was kind of unique to us. And we were able to lean into that. And there was an appetite for it that we weren't sure was going to exist at the beginning, right? If you go back to the very beginning, it was lots of stuff. I mean, you were writing game day articles season 1, right? Like we were trying everything. So we've kind of settled into our groove now. I think it works really well. And our ability to then also continue to support ourselves through this with the Patreon and everything, I think has been, kind of important in what separates us from maybe some of the other groups as well. So I been very thankful to everybody for that. But yeah, I would say the interactive nature of it kind of separates us from just about any other hockey media entity around the league. The fact that we are there to answer questions, not just on mailbag episodes like this, which a lot of podcasts do, but we are there post game to answer any question you have about game or the team. We have our multiple streams like my prospect chat tonight on Patreon. We have our own Discord server where people can come in and again have that community element, but also just tag us and ask us a question, right? When something happens, we're very accessible on social media as far as responding to questions, or at least you are. I need to be better about it, but you are. You know what I mean? Like I think that accessibility aspect of it has been unique to us and helped us kind of build the community and kind of establish ourselves in the spot that we have. Just because, we really value and understand the fact that none of this happens without you all. And so we've really wanted to put you all at the forefront of everything we do. And, stuff like, hey, we're going to be talking to so-and-so who, do you have questions? What does the community want to know? Kind of giving the community a voice within the media landscape and with the team. That's been another thing that we've been able to do that I don't know other people have been able to do. So those are the things that I think about, quickly anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, well said, all of that. I mean, you covered so many of the things that I had in my notes that I was going to talk about. Yeah, we try and give fans that voice and be that direct kind of link between the team and the fans and just being accessible to everybody. And like that is something that, as you mentioned, we kind of had to learn and figure out as the time has gone on, right? We didn't have like this super solid plan and identity of what we are from the very beginning. I mean, if you want to go back, I would say go back and look at those, like the written game day stories from the beginning and see how much things have changed. That's the best representation, but they actually, I don't think, are on the internet anymore. So go back and look at like our earliest YouTube videos and, see how things have changed. Right. So that's just kind of the process I think that everyone goes through, but I think we've arrived at something really great and again, it's because of the community. It's because of all of you listening and, being that accessible and being able to put the work that we put into it is, like Dylan mentioned, the Patreon, like we are able to kind of do this full time. And so that's what gives us the ability to do all this. And for that, we are really, really grateful. So thanks to all of you for kind of letting us play this role in the Kraken media landscape, because it's a blast every single day. Like I think there's so many times where we just take a look back and realize like, we're so lucky to be doing what we're doing. Yeah.
I certainly for me, and I'm pretty sure it's the same way for you. It's not even just the fact that we get to do it, like go to the game, cover the game, be there for practices, all that kind of stuff. It's the way that we're able to do it. Right. Like we've been able and fortunate enough because of everybody's support to do it in a way where we can talk in a deeper, more, with more analysis, which is something that you and I would absolutely want to be doing. And thankfully the community has been really receptive to that. And so, we've been able to kind of talk about this team the way that we always talked about hockey and the way that we would want to talk about hockey. And again,
I remember when we were in middle school and I was hanging out on your couch, we were watching hockey games, and this is the kind of conversation we'd be having. And now we get to have this conversation with a bunch of friends. Right. Who all get to hang out and be part of that group too. And it's just the more the merrier. Exactly.
And to be able to do it also all honestly and sincerely too, right? Like we've been able and fortunate to be in a spot where, I know people aren't going to be thrilled to hear it, but I could talk about the idea of trading Jagger Firkus on the podcast, and everybody's not going to review bomb us into oblivion and disappear, right? Like I can be honest and give a truthful take to how I see things, and that people will be receptive to that. And so that's another thing that I am eternally grateful to the community for, is just that kind of understanding and appreciation of that.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So like I said, we could go on for hours probably about this stuff, but
and the state of sports journalism as a whole and all of that kind of stuff. And what the future should
certainly
be.
Have our thoughts there.
Yes. Some of the conversations, man, it's crazy.
Yep. But thank you for getting us started there for a little bit, Viren. We do appreciate that question and the opportunity to kind of talk about that. So I think it's time to close the mailbag.
Yep.
And to open it at some point later. Yep.
It's gone.
Yeah. All right. There we go. Close the mailbag, close the laptop. Thank you, everybody, for all these awesome questions. Mm-hmm. Every time I look forward to these mailbags. I know we said it at the top of the episode, but these are some of our favorite episodes because you always provide us with fantastic questions that get us thinking things we would not normally talk about on a regular podcast, because we just wouldn't think of them. So thank you so much for providing everything for the mailbag, and looking forward to the next one.
Yep, and looking forward to spending some time with everybody on the prospect chat later, and then also in the future at Queen Anne Beer Hall. So throw that out there again. Whether you want one of Dylan's favorite foods, such as buffalo wings, or one of Dylan's favorite foods, such as pretzels, or one of Dylan's favorite foods, such as hot dogs or French fries, Queen Anne Beer Hall's got you covered according to everything. So I love that. Looking forward to getting up there and visiting them again, like I always do. So that's that. And then also let's just geez, RJ, off-season started and our podcast got longer somehow. Hour and a half again. How does this keep happening?
I don't know. There's no way we can keep this up for August, though. No way.
Our way too early series? You don't think so? I don't know.
That's true. Sorry. Okay. We'll apologize in advance for the 2-hour-long August podcasts that are surely coming.
Yes, exactly. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see y'all next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.